Chapter 1. The Uninvited Competitor. The twin suns of the jungle world of Zalviros burned in the sky like molten eyes, bathing the towering trees and dense underbrush in a surreal amber glow. The air was thick, oppressive, and alive with the sound of alien fauna clicks, growls, and the occasional roar echoing through the distance. It was a world of predators and prey, where the weak were consumed and only the strong endured. High above the jungle floor, Violara Chuinar perched on a massive tree branch. Her lean, athletic frame blended seamlessly with the scaled, bioluminescent armor she wore, its surface shifting hues to match her surroundings. As a member of the Vathari, an apex race known across the galaxy for their hunting prowess, Violara was a living embodiment of strength and grace. Her shimmering eyes, each capable of perceiving different spectrums of light, scanned the jungle for her target. This hunt wasn't just any hunt. It was the trial of ascension. To rise among the Vathari ranks and claim the title of Prime Huntress, Violara needed to capture and subdue a creature of legend, the Tirkalith, a massive, reptilian beast that was part myth, part nightmare, and entirely deadly. Only the boldest dared to face it, and few survived the attempt. Violara's lips curled into a faint smirk as she crouched lower, her hands gripping the rough bark of the tree. The Tirkalith was close. She could feel it in the stillness of the air, in the sudden hush that had fallen over the jungle as lesser creatures sensed the apex predator's presence. Her enhanced hearing picked up faint vibrations in the ground, each tremor a footstep of something massive moving through the underbrush. Her people would be watching, the hunt broadcast across the Vathari network. Her every movement, her every decision, would be analyzed and judged. But Violara didn't care about the audience. She was born for this moment, her body and mind honed by years of rigorous training. Failure wasn't an option. As she prepared to move, a strange sound reached her ears, sharp, rhythmic, and entirely out of place in the natural symphony of the jungle. It was mechanical, deliberate, and unsettlingly close. Violara froze, her four eyes narrowing as she scanned the forest below. At first, she saw nothing but swaying leaves and the flicker of sunlight on water. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows, moving with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. It was a human. The figure was tall and broad-shouldered, clad in a patchwork of armor and gear that spoke of both practicality and a lack of finesse. His dark hair was damp with sweat, his face set in a mask of focus as he moved through the jungle with a weapon slung across his back, a strange amalgam of human ingenuity and alien technology. Violara's smirk faded, replaced by a frown. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage. Their presence tolerated more out of curiosity than respect. They were primitive, unruly, and entirely unremarkable. Yet here was one, striding boldly into her hunt as if he belonged. The human stopped near a pool of water, crouching to examine the ground. Violara watched as he brushed aside leaves and debris, revealing a deep, clawed footprint embedded in the soil. The Tirkalith's footprint. Her frown deepened. Was he tracking the beast? Impossible. No human could comprehend the intricacies of Vathari hunting techniques, let alone match them. And yet, as she observed him, she couldn't deny his skill. His movements were purposeful, his tracking methodical. He moved like a predator, not prey. Violara's pride bristled. The trial of ascension was sacred, a rite meant for the Vathari alone. This human interloper was a distraction, a nuisance she couldn't afford. She considered ending his interference right then and there. A single shot from her plasma bow would be enough. But as she drew her weapon, a new thought occurred to her. Perhaps this human wasn't a hindrance, but an opportunity. If he survived long enough to face the Tirkalith, he could serve as a useful distraction, a pawn in her hunt. Violara lowered her bow, her lips curving into a smile that was equal parts intrigue and amusement. She would allow him to live. For now. The prey revealed. The hours that followed tested Violara's patience. The human moved with surprising efficiency, his path paralleling hers as they both tracked the Tirkalith deeper into the jungle. Several times, she considered revealing herself, either to confront him or to warn him of the danger he was walking into. But each time, she held back, choosing instead to observe. Her curiosity grew with each passing moment. The human's methods were crude compared to Vathari standards, yet undeniably effective. He used tools to amplify the faint vibrations of the Tir-Kalitha's footsteps, marking their direction with precision. He set traps along potential paths, each one ingeniously simple yet devastatingly effective. Violara couldn't deny her grudging respect. This human was unlike any she had encountered before. His resilience, his adaptability, his sheer audacity, all of it defied her expectations. As the suns dipped below the horizon, casting the jungle in hues of deep blue and violet, Violara finally caught sight of their quarry. The Tir-Kalith emerged from the underbrush, its massive frame blotting out the twilight. It was a creature of nightmares, thick, scaled hide glinting like metal, claws the size of swords, and eyes that burned with primal fury. Violara felt her pulse quicken, a thrill coursing through her veins. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The culmination of her training, her dedication, her ambition. The beast was hers to conquer. And yet, the human stepped forward first. The human didn't hesitate. He drew his Weapon A rifle modified with alien tech and fired a burst of plasma rounds at the Tir-Kalitha's flank. The beast roared, its deafening cry shaking the trees and sending birds scattering into the night. It turned toward its attacker, its massive tail sweeping through the air with enough force to shatter stone. Violara watched in astonishment as the human dodged the attack, his movements fluid and precise. He fired again, aiming for the creature's joints, each shot carefully calculated to exploit its weaknesses. For the first time in her life, Violara felt something akin to awe. This human, this primitive, unpredictable being, was holding his own against one of the galaxy's most feared predators. It was both infuriating and exhilarating to witness. But the Tir-Kalith was far from defeated. It lunged at the human, its massive claws tearing through the ground as it charged. The human scrambled backward, narrowly avoiding being crushed. He threw a grenade, a small, spherical device that exploded in a flash of light and sound, disorienting the beast. Violara knew she couldn't wait any longer. If the human managed to kill the Tir-Kalith, her trial would be forfeit. She knocked an arrow in her plasma bow and fired, the glowing projectile striking the beast's side. It roared in pain, turning its attention toward her. She leapt from the tree, landing gracefully on the jungle floor. Her four eyes locked onto the human, who stared back at her in shock and confusion. "Stay out of my way," she growled, her voice low and dangerous. The human smirked, his stance unyielding. "I could say the same to you, lady." Valara's patience snapped. The trial was hers to win, and she wouldn't let anyone human or otherwise stand in her way. Chapter 2. The Reluctant Alliance. The jungle seemed to hold its breath as Violara and the human stood face to face. The Tir-Kalith roared in the background, its thunderous cry shaking the trees, but neither hunter flinched. Their eyes locked, predator meeting predator. Valara's four shimmering eyes narrowed as she appraised her unexpected rival. The human's expression was infuriatingly calm, his smirk conveying confidence and defiance. She tightened her grip on her plasma bow, her scales glinting faintly as they shifted hues to reflect her rising irritation. "Leave now," she said coldly, her voice carrying the sharp edge of command. "This prey is mine." The human didn't back down. Instead, he chuckled, his voice a low rumble that grated on her nerves. "Your prey? I didn't see your name on it. Besides, you don't exactly look like you've got it handled." Valara's eyes flared, her pride bristling at the insult. "I am Valara Chuinar, Huntress of the Vathari elite. You are a trespasser, unworthy of Dash." A massive clawed tail slammed into the ground between them, sending dirt and debris flying. Both hunters leapt back, their quarrel momentarily forgotten as the Tir-Kalith made its presence known. The beast towered above them, its eyes burning with rage as it lunged forward, claws tearing through the earth. Violara acted instinctively, firing a plasma arrow at the creature's vulnerable underbelly. The projectile struck true, eliciting a roar of pain. Beside her, the human raised his weapon and unleashed a volley of plasma bolts, each shot aimed with calculated precision. For a moment, the two hunters moved in unison, their attacks complementing each other in a deadly dance. Violara had to admit begrudgingly that the human was more skilled than she had anticipated. His movements were fluid, his aim impeccable. He wasn't just a brute with a gun. He was a predator in his own right. But the Tirkaloth wasn't so easily defeated. With a deafening roar, it swept its massive tail in a wide arc, forcing both hunters to scatter. Vylara landed gracefully on a nearby tree branch, her bioluminescent armor blending seamlessly with the foliage. The human, to her surprise, managed an equally agile retreat, rolling into a crouch behind a cluster of rocks. "This thing's tougher than it looks," he called out, his voice laced with both tension and excitement. Vylara scowled. "I told you to leave. And miss all the fun? Not a chance." A deal in the heat of battle. The Tirkaloth roared again, its claws raking against the ground as it charged toward Vylara's perch. She leapt to another branch, her plasma bow firing a rapid series of arrows that struck the beast's thick hide. Each shot burned into the creature's flesh, but it only seemed to enrage it further. Meanwhile, the human moved to flank the beast, his weapon discharging bursts of energy that targeted its joints. The combination of their attacks began to slow the creature, its movements becoming more labored as it struggled to keep up with its agile opponents. But it wasn't enough. The Tirkaloth was still a force of nature, and Vylara knew they couldn't afford to let the battle drag on. Every second they spent fighting increased the likelihood of reinforcements arriving, other predators, or worse, Zalviros's notoriously aggressive scavengers. Vylara landed near the human, her bow still trained on the beast. "We cannot defeat it like this," she admitted grudgingly. "It will outlast us." The human glanced at her, his smirk returning. "So what do you suggest, O great Huntress?" She ignored his tone, focusing instead on the battlefield. "We need to drive it into the ravine to the east. The terrain will limit its movement and give us the advantage." The human raised an eyebrow. "And you're sure you're not just trying to trap me instead?" Vylara's glare could have melted steel. "I would have killed you already if that were my intent." He laughed, slinging his weapon over his shoulder. "Fair point. All right, let's do it. But if this works, we're splitting the glory." Vylara hesitated, her pride warring with practicality. The trial of ascension demanded she claim the kill alone, but the human's help was the only way to ensure their survival. Finally, she nodded. "Agreed. But do not slow me down. Wouldn't dream of it." The trap is set. The plan was simple in theory but required precise execution. Vylara and the human worked in tandem, using their combined agility and firepower to corral the Tirkaloth toward the ravine. It wasn't easy. The beast fought back with relentless fury, its claws and tail carving through the jungle like a living storm. Vylara's plasma arrows struck the ground around the creature, creating small explosions that forced it to veer eastward. Meanwhile, the human used grenades and well-placed shots to cut off its escape routes, his tactics crude but effective. As they neared the ravine, the terrain grew treacherous. The ground was uneven, littered with sharp rocks and dense undergrowth. Vylara moved with practiced ease, her movements a blur of grace and precision. The human, to her surprise, kept pace, his rugged efficiency matching her elegance in a way that was both infuriating and fascinating. Finally, the edge of the ravine came into view. Vylara climbed to higher ground, her four eyes scanning the battlefield as she prepared to make the final move. "It's almost there," she called down to the human. "Keep it distracted." "Working on it," he shouted back, narrowly dodging a swipe of the Tirkaloth's tail. Vylara drew a special arrow from her quiver, high-yield plasma charge designed for maximum impact. She knocked it carefully, her hands steady as she took aim at the creature's hind legs. "Hold it steady," she yelled. The human didn't hesitate. He dove into the open, drawing the Tirkaloth's attention with a burst of plasma fire. The beast roared, its massive claws tearing into the ground as it lunged toward him. Vylara released the arrow. It flew through the air with a brilliant streak of light, striking the Tirkaloth's leg with a deafening explosion. The creature stumbled, its balance shifting as the ground beneath it gave way. With one final, guttural roar, it tumbled into the ravine, its massive form disappearing into the darkness below. A fragile victory. For a moment, the jungle was silent. Vylara stood on the edge of the ravine, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. The human approached her, his weapon slung over his back and a wide grin on his face. "Well," he said, breaking the silence, "that was fun." Vylara turned to him, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and irritation. "You were reckless." "And you're welcome," he shot back, his grin unwavering. "Face it, you couldn't have done this without me." Vailara's jaw tightened, her pride warring with the truth of his words. "Finally," she sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Perhaps." The human extended a hand. "Name's Jason, by the way. Jason Kane." Vailara hesitated before taking his hand, her grip firm. "Vailara Chuinar." Jason's grin widened. "Nice to meet you, Vailara. So, what happens now? Do we fight over who gets to claim the kill?" Vailara's eyes flickered toward the ravine, her mind racing. The trial of Ascension required her to claim the kill alone, but she couldn't deny that Jason had played a crucial role. Perhaps there was another way, a compromise that would satisfy both of them. "We will discuss that later," she said, her voice measured. "For now, we need to ensure the creature is dead." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Fair enough. Lead the way, Huntress." As they descended into the ravine together, Vailara couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for her unlikely ally. Jason Kane was more than just a trespasser, he was a rival, a partner, and perhaps something more. Chapter 3. Into the Ravine. Vailara and Jason moved cautiously along the jagged cliffs of the ravine, the shadows of the dense jungle above cloaking the depths in twilight. The air was cooler here, the oppressive heat of the twin suns tempered by the steep walls. Despite their uneasy alliance, the silence between the two hunters was tense, thick with unspoken competition. Vailara's four shimmering eyes scanned the rocky path ahead. Her bioluminescent armor dimmed its glow to match the muted hues of the environment, blending her seamlessly into the terrain. She glanced over her shoulder at Jason, who was following closely. His movements, while not as fluid as hers, were calculated and steady. She had to admit grudgingly that his adaptability was impressive. Humans were often dismissed as inferior, yet Jason seemed to defy every expectation. "Watch your step," she warned, her voice low but firm. "The rocks here are unstable." Jason smirked, his boots crunching softly against the gravel. "I've handled worse." Vailara resisted the urge to roll her eyes. "Arrogance will get you killed." "Confidence," Jason corrected, his tone teasing. "Big difference." Before Vailara could retort, a low rumble echoed through the ravine. Both hunters froze, their gazes snapping toward the source of the sound. The ground beneath their feet vibrated faintly, and the rumble grew louder, deeper, resonating through the rock walls. "It's alive," Vailara murmured, her voice barely audible. Jason unslung his weapon, his expression sharpening. "Good. Let's finish this." The beast reawakens. The Tirkaloth emerged from the shadows like a nightmare given form. Its massive body was battered and bloodied from the fall, but its burning eyes still gleamed with primal fury. Jagged scales jutted out from its hide, and its powerful limbs flexed as it let out a guttural roar that shook the ravine. Vailara felt her pulse quicken, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through her veins. This was the moment she had trained for, the ultimate test of her skill and resolve. Yet, as the Tirkaloth charged forward, its sheer size and ferocity were overwhelming. Jason moved first. He raised his rifle and fired a volley of plasma bolts, aiming for the creature's damaged leg. The shot struck true, eliciting another roar of pain, but the beast didn't slow. It barreled toward them with relentless force, its claws tearing through the rocky ground. "Split up," Vailara shouted, leaping onto a nearby ledge. She fired a plasma arrow at the Tirkaloth's head, the projectile exploding against its armored scales. The creature snarled, momentarily distracted, as Jason darted to the opposite side of the ravine. "Got a plan?" Jason called out, ducking behind a boulder as the beast swiped at him. Vailara knocked another arrow, her eyes narrowing as she analyzed the battlefield. The ravine's uneven terrain could work to their advantage, but only if they coordinated their attacks. She hated relying on someone else, especially a human, but there was no other option. "We take out its legs," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "It can't charge if it can't stand." Jason grinned. "Now you're talking." Coordinated chaos. Vailara and Jason moved in tandem, their attacks synchronized as they targeted the Tirkaloth's limbs. Vailara's plasma arrows struck with precision, burning through the beast's thick hide, while Jason's rifle unleashed rapid bursts of energy that kept the creature off balance. Despite their efforts, the Tirkalith refused to go down easily. It lashed out with its massive tail, sending debris flying in all directions. Valara narrowly avoided a jagged rock as it crashed into the cliffside, her agility saving her from a potentially fatal blow. Jason wasn't as lucky. The tail caught him in its sweep, knocking him off his feet and sending him tumbling across the rocky ground. He groaned, clutching his side as he struggled to get up. Valara's eyes darted toward him, a pang of irritation and concern flashing through her. "Get up, human. We don't have time for this." Jason coughed, pushing himself to his knees. Yeah, just give me a second." The Tirkalith turned its attention toward him, its claws digging into the ground as it prepared to lunge. Valara didn't hesitate. She leapt from her perch, landing between Jason and the beast. With a swift motion, she fired an explosive arrow at the creature's face, the blast stunning it momentarily. "Stay down," she hissed at Jason, her tone more commanding than kind. Jason grinned weakly. "Didn't know you cared." Valara ignored him, her focus remaining on the Tirkalith. The beast shook off the stun and roared, its fiery gaze fixed on her. She drew another arrow, her muscles tensing as she prepared for its next move. The final strike. The battle raged on, the ravine echoing with the sounds of plasma fire and the Tirkalith's enraged roars. Valara and Jason fought with everything they had, their movements a blur of precision and raw determination. Despite their differences, they worked together seamlessly, each compensating for the other's weaknesses. But the Tirkalith was relentless, its fury refusing to wane. Valara's arms ached from firing so many arrows, and Jason's breathing was labored, his injuries slowing him down. They couldn't keep this up much longer. "We need to end this," Valara said, her voice edged with urgency. Jason wiped blood from his brow, his gaze flicking toward the cliffside above. "What about that?" Valara followed his line of sight and saw a cluster of massive boulders perched precariously on the edge of the ravine. If they could trigger a rock slide, it might be enough to crush the Tirkalith or at least incapacitate it. "It's risky," she said, calculating the odds. "But it could work." Jason smirked, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Risky's my middle name." Valara rolled her eyes but nodded. "Fine, I'll distract it. You trigger the slide." Without waiting for his response, she darted toward the Tirkalith, firing a barrage of plasma arrows to draw its attention. The beast roared, charging after her with single-minded fury. Jason climbed the cliffside as quickly as his injuries allowed, his hands gripping the rough stone. When he reached the cluster of boulders, he planted a small explosive charge and set the timer. "Valara," he shouted, "get clear." Valara glanced back, her 4 eyes locking onto his. She sprinted toward the edge of the ravine, her movements a blur as the timer ticked down. The explosion was deafening. The boulders tumbled down in a massive cascade, their combined weight slamming into the Tirkalith with a force that shook the ground. The beast let out one final, earth-shaking roar before collapsing, its massive body pinned beneath the rubble. A Pyrrhic victory. Silence fell over the ravine, broken only by the distant cries of jungle creatures. Valara and Jason stood on opposite sides of the battlefield, their bodies bruised and bloodied, but alive. The Tirkalith lay motionless, its fiery eyes finally extinguished. Valara approached the fallen beast cautiously, her plasma bow still at the ready. She placed a hand on its thick hide, feeling the heat of its lifeless body. The hunt was over. Jason limped toward her, his grin tired but triumphant. "Well, that was fun." Valara turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You're reckless." "And you're welcome," he shot back, leaning against a rock for support. "Face it, you couldn't have done this without me." Valara hesitated, her pride warring with the truth of his words. Finally, she sighed, lowering her weapon. "Perhaps." Jason extended a hand, his grin widening. "So, what now? Do we fight over the glory, or are we calling it a team effort?" Valara stared at his hand, then at his face. For a moment, she considered her options. The trial of Ascension demanded that she claim the kill alone, but Jason had earned his place in this victory. Perhaps there was another way, a compromise that honored both their efforts. We'll discuss that later, she said, brushing past him. For now, we leave. Jason chuckled, following her toward the exit. You're a tough one, Violara. I like that. Violara didn't respond, but a faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She had underestimated this human, and though it irked her, she couldn't deny the grudging respect she felt. The hunt was over, but their journey was just beginning. Chapter 4. The Spoils of the Hunt. The jungle loomed like a silent witness as Violara and Jason made their way out of the ravine. The dead Tyrkoloth sprawled in the shadows behind them. Violara led the way, her bioluminescent armor dimming as the tension of the battle faded. Jason followed closely, his movements slower but determined, his injuries evident in the faint limp and the blood staining his makeshift armor. The victory had left them both battered, but the weight of their accomplishment was undeniable. Valara's mind churned with conflicting emotions. She had completed the hunt, yet not in the way tradition dictated. The trial of ascension required the hunter to claim their prey alone, without interference. Allowing Jason to assist her was a violation of the sacred right. But she couldn't deny the truth. Without him, she might not have survived. His skill, his ingenuity, his audacity had all been essential to bringing down the Tyrkoloth. The realization gnawed at her pride, yet it also intrigued her. You're awfully quiet, Jason remarked, his voice breaking the stillness. Not one to celebrate, huh? Violara glanced back at him, her 4 eyes narrowing slightly. The hunt is only part of the trial. There is still much to resolve. Jason grinned, despite the pain etched into his features. Let me guess. Now comes the part where you try to take all the credit. Violara's jaw tightened. The trial of ascension is a sacred right. It demands solitude. You are an anomaly. Jason raised an eyebrow, his tone turning playful. An anomaly? I've been called worse. Violara turned away, ignoring his comment as she pressed onward. The jungle seemed to thicken around them, the underbrush teeming with life. Every snap of a branch, every distant growl, kept her on edge. Zalviros was a world of predators, and even with the Tyrkoloth dead, they weren't safe. A predator becomes prey. As they approached a clearing, the jungle grew unnaturally quiet. Violara froze, her enhanced senses picking up faint vibrations in the ground. She raised a hand, signaling Jason to stop. What is it? He whispered, his voice low. Violara scanned the shadows, her bioluminescence flaring faintly as her eyes adjusted to the darkness. We are not alone. Jason tightened his grip on his weapon, his body tensing. Another beast? Violara shook her head. No, Vathari. No sooner had she spoken than a group of figures emerged from the foliage. They were clad in similar bioluminescent armor, their forms sleek and predatory. Each carried a weapon, and their eyes glimmered with the same multifaceted sheen as Violara's. At the forefront stood a figure taller and broader than the rest, his armor adorned with ornate markings signifying his rank. Violara Chuinar, the leader said, his voice cold and authoritative. You have violated the trial of ascension. Valara's hands clenched into fists. I completed the hunt. The Tyrkoloth is dead. The leader's gaze shifted to Jason, his expression hardening. You allowed an outsider to interfere. The trial demands solitude, yet you consorted with this human. Jason stepped forward, his weapon still lowered. Consorted? Buddy, I don't know what you're talking about, but if it weren't for me, that big lizard would still be stomping around. The Vathari warriors bristled at his tone, their weapons raising slightly. Violara shot him a glare. Be silent, human. Jason shrugged, just stating the facts. The leader's gaze returned to Violara. You have disgraced our traditions. The hunt is invalid. You are unworthy of the title of Prime Huntress. Vylara's heart sank, but her resolve didn't falter. I followed the Tyrkoloth alone. I lured it into the ravine. I made the final strike. The human was a tool, a means to an end. Jason raised an eyebrow. A tool? Really? The leader's eyes narrowed. The council will decide your fate. Until then, you are stripped of your rank and privileges. Vylara's jaw tightened, her pride warring with the sting of humiliation. Very well. I will face the council. The leader gestured to his warriors, who surrounded Vylara and Jason. And the human? Valara hesitated, her gaze flickering toward Jason. He had saved her life, and despite his infuriating demeanor, she couldn't let him be executed. He is under my protection. The leader's expression darkened. You risk much for this outsider. Valara stepped closer, her voice firm. I am Valara Chuinar. I take responsibility for my actions. The leader regarded her for a long moment before nodding. Very well. Bring them both. The council's judgment. Valara and Jason were escorted to a Vathari outpost hidden deep within the jungle. The sleek, bioluminescent structures blended seamlessly with the natural environment, their organic curves and glowing surfaces a testament to Vathari craftsmanship. Jason couldn't help but whistle in admiration as they entered the main chamber. This is impressive, he said, his voice echoing in the vast, dome-like room. You guys don't mess around. Valara shot him a warning look. Do not speak unless spoken to. Jason smirked but remained silent as they approached the council, a group of elder Vathari seated on raised platforms. Each wore elaborate armor adorned with symbols of rank and lineage, their expressions unreadable as they observed the two newcomers. Valara stepped forward, bowing deeply. Counselors, I present the corpse of the Tirkalith as proof of my hunt. One of the elders leaned forward, his voice sharp. You dare stand before us after breaking the sacred rite? Your actions have shamed our traditions. Valara's 4 eyes met his, her tone unwavering. I did what was necessary to succeed. The human was a means to an end. Jason's patience finally snapped. All right, enough of this means to an end nonsense. I didn't help you just to be thrown under the bus. We work together, whether you like it or not. The council murmured among themselves, their voices a mix of curiosity and disdain. Another elder spoke, his tone measured. This human displays courage. Perhaps he is not as primitive as he appears. Valara glared at Jason. You are not helping. Jason crossed his arms. I think I'm doing just fine. The first elder raised a hand, silencing the room. Enough. Valara Chuinar, your actions have put the sanctity of the trial of ascension into question. However, the human's involvement cannot be ignored. He has demonstrated skill and valor, qualities we value. Valara's breath caught. What are you saying? The elder's gaze softened. Your trial is invalid, but your resourcefulness is noted. You will not be cast out, but neither will you be named Prime Huntress. Instead, you will undertake a new trial, one that acknowledges the bond you have forged with this outsider. Valara's eyes widened. A bond? He is nothing but Dash. Jason interrupted with a grin. A partner. Let's call it that. The elder nodded. Then it is settled. You will face this trial together. Should you succeed, you will both be honored among the Vathari. Valara's pride screamed in protest, but she bowed her head. I accept. Jason clapped her on the shoulder, his grin widening. Looks like we're stuck with each other. Valara sighed, already regretting her decision. The journey ahead would test them both, but for now, they were allies, however reluctantly.